Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Golden Moments. I'm Bruce Howard. 2020 marks the 90th year for Skelly Field at H.A. Chapman Stadium. When it was built in 1930, it was known as Skelly Field. And then for 6 decades, it was known as Skelly Stadium. And then in the latest renovation in 2007 and 2008, it became Skelly Field at H.A. Chapman Stadium. Here's a look back at one of Tulsa's most iconic athletic facilities and certainly the most enduring.
Although you wouldn't know it today, with TU's great facilities on campus, Golden Hurricane Athletics didn't have many places to call home in the 1920s. There was the new basketball arena, Harwell Gymnasium, which opened in 1921. But for the most part, Hurricane teams led a vagabond existence when it came to home venues. And that included football, which in the 20s played at McNulty Park, the Tulsa Oilers professional baseball team's home stadium.
Which was not ideal because the field was only 90 yards long instead of 100, and that wasn't really what you want, which led to some controversies.
The referee, and in those days they had one, okay? The referee would had to make his opinion of whether a guy, if he was running on a long run and broke away, or a guy caught a pass in the middle of a pack and he went in into the end zone, if they would have scored if there was 10 more yards. And through all the research I've done through reading newspaper articles, there was lots of arguments and fights at McNulty Park during TU football games.
All that changed in the late 1920s as the idea of an on-campus football stadium began to take shape.
Although Skelly Stadium was built in 1930, the groundwork for it was laid 5 years earlier in 1925 when the University of Tulsa shocked the college football world by hiring Elmer Gloomy Gus Henderson from Southern Cal as the new coach for TU.
And in his first 5 years, Tulsa went 34-10. Had great teams. They beat the area teams on a regular basis: Arkansas, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma City University, and also the Haskell Indian School out of Topeka, Kansas. That was a big power in the Midwest back in the 20s and 30s.
Coach Henderson approached some business leaders, and William Skelly stepped up with $125,000, and he really got the project launched. And he and Coach Henderson talked with other business leaders in town, and they raised the remaining money, $175,000.
2 years later, they built this stadium, you see, because people would not come to see TU play teachers' colleges, and that's about all they could schedule most of the time.
Tulsa University owned the land that was a former peach orchard, and they dedicated the stadium, started the groundwork on May the 4th, 1930.
In a remarkable turnaround, 5 months later in the fall of 1930, Skelly Field was ready. And on October 4th, the Arkansas Razorbacks came to Tulsa to help christen the new facility.
When Arkansas was signed to be the opening game, boy, that created a lot of excitement. And of course, it wasn't much of a travel, even in those days, for the people to come over from Arkansas. Big crowd for the opening day, and it was a lot of excitement.
What a way to start. On the opening kickoff, Arkansas fumbles and Tulsa's Johnny Potts recovers. And on the next play, Billy Bame scores a touchdown for TU. The crowd goes wild. The route was on. Tulsa thoroughly drubs Arkansas 26-6. What a way to start out at the new stadium for TU.
They actually dedicated the stadium and had the opening ceremonies at halftime because the TU band wanted to play and march on the field. So it was quite an event.
Not only was it a great start to a new stadium, but a springboard to later success.
And it just was magnificent for TU. Really put them in the upper level of college football.
But once they started playing OU and A&M or OSU, Arkansas, then the fans came.
In fact, everybody wanted to come to play at Skelly Field. Tulsa, in the first 6 years that the stadium was open and being used for football, they averaged 7 home games a year out of 10 because everybody wanted to come to Tulsa to be a part of this great facility.
It was the field at Tulsa. That new stadium helped elevate Tulsa's football program, gave it, and really that also laid the groundwork for the great success in the 1940s when Tulsa was going to New Year's Bowl games for several consecutive years in a row during World War II and was among the top teams in the nation.
The 14,500 capacity, small in today's terms, was one of the largest in the region.
When it opened, it was one of the state-of-the-art facilities. It was one of the nicer stadiums in the area.
Back then, if you had 8,000 to 10,000 people to come to a football game, that was a large crowd. So for its time, it was the perfect stadium for Tulsa and was one of the top stadiums in this four-state area.
With expansion in 1947, Skelly Field became Skelly Stadium, and the Glenn Dobbs Field expansion in the mid-60s, Skelly Stadium became not only a terrific place to watch football, but a facility that hosted tons of different events and teams.
I don't think there was ever a car race at Skelly Stadium, but just about everything else has been there. One of the very first American Football League exhibition games was here when the Houston Oilers played the Dallas Texans in 1960.
After the renovation in the mid-60s, 1965, you hosted NFL preseason games involving the Dallas Cowboys, just when the Dallas Cowboys were starting to get good, and there were other NFL preseason games before and after that as well.
Still today, the 1966 exhibition game between the Tulsa Oilers and the St. Louis Cardinals drew 18,900 fans. That's still the largest crowd for a baseball game in the state of Oklahoma. That was held at Skelly Stadium.
It was also the home for the Tulsa Roughnecks when they were drawing 15,000 to 20,000 fans a game in the soccer boom of the late 70s and early 80s.
Billy Graham had a rally at the stadium that for many years was the third largest attended game or event at the stadium.
USFL, big-time football in Tulsa in 1984, and so there's just been so many great events that have been held in the stadium over 90 years.
It's a very, very historical place, not only for the University of Tulsa, but for the city and the state of Oklahoma as well.
With the latest renovations in 2008, there's a unique mixture of old and new at Skelly Field at H.A. Chapman Stadium.
It's so modern, it's updated, and you still see on the east side of the stadium over there, it still says Skelly Field, the way it was put back in 1930. You see the nostalgia, but then you also see the huge scoreboard, the modern conveniences and things like that. So it is kind of neat to blend the old and traditional with the new and modern.
Skelly Field, Skelly Stadium, Skelly Field at H.A. Chapman Stadium. No matter what the label, it's truly been a great home for Golden Hurricane football through the years.